My wife's mother moved into our guest room temporarily, then started redecorating the entire house. When I objected, my wife said, "It's my house too. Deal with it." So I smiled, called my lawyer, and reminded her the house was gifted to me by my grandfather. Her name wasn't even on the deed. By Friday, she was packing, she was apologizing, but I'd already filed the papers. I, 34 came home on a Tuesday evening to find my living room furniture rearranged. The couch I'd inherited from my grandfather sat pushed against the wrong wall, and the coffee table he'd built with his own hands was gone entirely. In its place stood some modern glass monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. My mother-in-law stood in the center of the room, directing 2 delivery men like a general commanding troops. I asked what was happening. She barely glanced at me, said she was making improvements, that the house needed a woman's touch. I looked past her toward the kitchen where my wife stood, arms crossed, watching me with a strange defiance I'd never seen before. I asked her what was going on. She said her mother was helping us update the place, that it was long overdue. I reminded her that I liked the house exactly as it was. She shrugged and said I'd get used to it. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. My wife and I had been married for 6 years. We'd met in college, built what I thought was a solid partnership. The house had been mine before the marriage, a gift from my grandfather when I turned 25. He'd bought it decades ago, maintained it carefully, filled it with furniture he'd either built or restored himself. When he passed 3 years ago, I'd promised myself I'd preserve his legacy. Every room held memories of him teaching me woodworking in the basement, sharing coffee at the kitchen table, watching old westerns in the living room. My mother-in-law had arrived 2 weeks earlier. Her apartment building was undergoing renovations, she'd explained, and she needed somewhere to stay. Just temporarily. Maybe a month, 6 weeks at most. I'd agreed because that's what you do for family. The guest room had been perfectly suitable. But within days, she'd started commenting on the decor. The curtains were outdated. The paint colors were depressing. The furniture was old-fashioned. I'd ignored it, assumed she was just making conversation. Then the changes started. First, new curtains appeared in the guest room. Then the bathroom down the hall got a new shower curtain and bath mat. I'd mentioned it to my wife, said her mother was getting a bit comfortable making purchases for our house. My wife had laughed it off, said they were just small things, that I was being uptight. I'd let it go, but the living room furniture was different. This was my grandfather's space, his legacy. I told the delivery men to stop, that there'd been a mistake. My mother-in-law stepped between us, informed me that my wife had approved everything, that they'd been planning this surprise for days. I turned to my wife. She met my eyes and told me her mother was right, that the house needed updating, that we couldn't live in a museum forever. I felt something crack inside my chest. I asked if she'd sold my grandfather's coffee table. She said her mother had donated it to some charity shop, that it was falling apart anyway. It wasn't falling apart. I'd restored it myself 2 years ago, spent weeks carefully refinishing the wood, replacing the broken drawer slide, polishing the brass handles. I asked which charity shop. She didn't know, said it didn't matter. I walked out of the house, sat in my car for an hour, hands shaking. When I came back inside, more had changed. The paintings my grandfather had collected were gone from the hallway walls, replaced with abstract prints that meant nothing to me. Family photos had been rearranged. His favorite reading chair was missing from the study. I found my wife in the bedroom, asked where the chair went. She said her mother thought the study needed a desk instead, something more functional. The chair was in the garage. I went to check. It was there, shoved in a corner, covered with a drop cloth like trash waiting for disposal. I brought it back inside, put it back in the study. Within an hour, my mother-in-law had moved it again. This pattern continued for 3 days. I'd restore something, they'd change it back. My wife stopped discussing it with me, just made decisions with her mother and presented them as done deals. I tried talking to her alone, asked why she was doing this. She said I was too attached to old things, that her mother was helping us modernize, that I should be grateful. I asked when her mother was planning to leave. She said there'd been complications with the apartment renovations, that it might be a few more months. Months. Not weeks. Months. On Friday morning, I came downstairs to find my grandfather's dining table being carried out the front door. I shouted for them to stop. My mother-in-law appeared, explained that she'd ordered a new dining set, that it would arrive Monday. The old table was going to the same charity shop. I blocked the doorway, told the movers to put it back. My wife came running from upstairs, demanded to know what I was doing. I said I was stopping them from throwing away my inheritance. She said it was just furniture, that I was being ridiculous. We stood there in the doorway, neither of us backing down. The movers looked uncomfortable. My mother-in-law watched with barely concealed satisfaction. Finally, my wife said the words that changed everything. She told me it was her house too, that she had every right to make decisions about the decor, that I needed to deal with it. I stepped aside, let the movers take the table, watched them load it into their truck. My wife looked triumphant. Her mother smiled and went back to examining paint samples for the kitchen. I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and called my lawyer. The conversation was brief. I explained the situation. He asked if my wife's name was on the deed. I said no. The house had been gifted to me by my grandfather before the marriage, remained solely in my name. We'd discussed adding her to the deed several times over the years, but I'd always hesitated, felt strange about altering something my grandfather had given specifically to me. She'd never pushed the issue. My lawyer told me I had options. The house was my separate property. I could ask them to leave. If they refused, I could start eviction proceedings. He also mentioned that given the circumstances, I might want to consider whether the marriage itself was worth saving. I'd been thinking the same thing. I told him I'd call him back. I came downstairs to find them painting the kitchen walls. The soft yellow my grandmother had chosen, that my grandfather had maintained for 40 years, was being covered in stark white. I didn't say anything, just watched. My mother-in-law asked if I liked it. I said it looked very clean. She seemed pleased. That evening, my wife asked why I was being so quiet. I told her I was thinking. She said I should stop sulking, that the changes were good for us, that her mother had excellent taste. I asked when her mother's apartment would be ready. She hesitated, then admitted the renovations had finished the previous week. Her mother just preferred staying with us. I asked if she planned to move out at all. My wife said probably not anytime soon, that it was nice having her mother around, that the house was big enough for 3 people. I smiled, told her that was good to know. She looked confused by my reaction, but didn't pursue it. I went to bed early, spent the night thinking about my grandfather, about the promises I'd made, about the life I thought I'd built. Saturday morning, I called my lawyer back, told him to prepare eviction notices for both my wife and her mother. He asked if I was sure. I said I'd never been more certain of anything. He said he'd have the papers ready by Monday. I also asked him to draw up divorce papers. He said he'd handle everything. I spent the weekend being pleasant, complimented the changes, agreed with my mother-in-law's suggestions for the bedroom, didn't argue when they talked about knocking down a wall to open up the living room. My wife seemed relieved, thought I'd finally come around. Her mother looked smug. Sunday evening, I went to the charity shop where they'd donated my grandfather's furniture. Spoke with the manager, explained the situation. By some miracle, nothing had been sold yet. I bought everything back. The coffee table, the paintings, even the dining table. Arranged for them to be stored at a friend's house until I needed them. Monday morning, my lawyer arrived at 9. I told my wife he was coming to discuss some property tax issues, that it was routine. She seemed unconcerned. Her mother was out getting more paint samples. My lawyer handed me the eviction notices. I served one to my wife right there in the kitchen. She read it slowly. I watched the confusion turn to disbelief, turn to anger. She asked what this was. I explained calmly that she had 30 days to vacate the property, that the house was mine alone, that her name had never been added to the deed. She said I couldn't do this. I said I absolutely could. She called me insane, said we were married, that I couldn't just kick her out. I reminded her of what she'd told me, that it was her house too, that I needed to deal with it. Turned out, legally, it wasn't her house at all. My lawyer confirmed everything I said. The house was my separate property, gifted before the marriage. I had every right to determine who lived there. My wife started crying, said I was being cruel, that she'd made a mistake, that we could fix this. I told her the furniture was one thing, but the attitude was another. She'd shown me exactly how much she valued my feelings, my history, my boundaries. She'd chosen her mother over me, repeatedly, without hesitation. When my mother-in-law came home, I served her notice too. She screamed at me, called me every name she could think of, threatened to sue. My lawyer calmly explained that she had no legal standing, that she was a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. She turned to my wife for support. My wife was still sitting at the kitchen table, crying. The next few days were tense. My wife tried everything. Tears, anger, bargaining, promises. Said she'd make her mother leave immediately, that we could restore all the furniture, that things would go back to normal. I told her it was too late. She'd made her priorities clear. Her mother tried a different approach, being suddenly sweet, apologizing for overstepping, offering to pay for everything to be changed back. I declined politely. My wife asked if I was really going to divorce her over furniture. I told her it wasn't about furniture. It was about respect. It was about her making major decisions without me, dismissing my feelings, allowing her mother to take over our home. It was about her telling me to deal with it when I objected, never imagining there would be consequences. She said she didn't know I felt so strongly. I pointed out that I'd objected repeatedly, that she'd ignored me every time. By Wednesday, my wife had hired her own lawyer, tried to argue for spousal rights to the property. My lawyer shut that down quickly. She tried to claim she'd contributed to the mortgage payments. But there was no mortgage. The house had been paid off decades ago. She tried to argue she'd paid for utilities and maintenance. My lawyer pointed out those were living expenses, not property investments. Her lawyer advised her to focus on the divorce settlement instead. Thursday, I came home to find them packing. My mother-in-law's room was already half empty. My wife was moving slowly, like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. She asked if I was really going through with it. I said I was. She asked if there was anything she could say to change my mind. I told her she'd had plenty of opportunities to consider my feelings when it mattered. She'd chosen not to. She asked where she was supposed to go. I suggested her mother's apartment, since the renovations were finished. She looked shocked that I knew. I told her I'd known since Saturday, that I'd given her chances to be honest. She broke down completely, admitted she'd been wrong, that her mother had pushed her to make changes, that she'd gotten caught up in it. I asked why she hadn't stood up for me. She didn't have an answer. Friday morning, they were gone. The house felt enormous and empty. I walked through each room, cataloging the damage. Most of it was cosmetic. Paint could be redone. Furniture could be replaced. The bones of the house were still solid, still the same structure my grandfather had loved. I called my friend who'd been storing the furniture. Had everything delivered back. Spent the weekend putting the house back together. The coffee table returned to its spot. The paintings went back on the walls. The dining table fit perfectly in its old space. By Sunday evening, most of the main rooms looked right again. My wife texted constantly. Apologies, explanations, pleas for another chance. I didn't respond. My mother-in-law tried calling from different numbers, alternating between threats and apologies. I blocked them all. My lawyer advised me to keep records of everything, but avoid direct communication. The divorce papers were filed the following Monday. My wife tried to contest it, but on what grounds? Irreconcilable differences was putting it mildly. Her lawyer tried to negotiate for spousal support. My lawyer countered with evidence of her voluntary departure and her mother's destructive behavior toward my property. We settled on a modest sum, far less than she'd hoped for. Some mutual friends reached out. Most had heard her version of events first. I was the controlling husband who'd kicked his wife out over interior decorating. I didn't bother defending myself to most of them. The ones who mattered, who knew me well, asked for my side. I explained simply. She'd moved her mother in without discussing long-term plans. They'd systematically dismantled my grandfather's legacy. When I objected, she'd dismissed me. When I'd enforced my legal rights to my own property, she'd acted victimized. The friends who understood stayed. The others weren't worth keeping. Update 1. It's been 3 months since my wife and her mother left. The divorce was finalized last week. She got the settlement we'd agreed on, took most of her personal belongings, and that was that. No dramatic final confrontation. No last-minute reconciliation attempt. Just signatures on papers and separate lives. I've spent these months slowly restoring the house. The kitchen is back to its soft yellow. I repainted it myself, mixed the color from memory and old photos until I got it right. The living room wall is back to its original layout. I hired professionals to repair the damage from when they'd tried to remove the built-in bookshelf. Most of my grandfather's furniture is back in place. Some pieces are gone forever. The dining table is back, but I never found the matching chairs. I've been using mismatched ones for now, plan to have new ones built in the same style eventually. 2 of the paintings never turned up at the charity shop. Either they were sold before I got there, or my mother-in-law took them somewhere else. I've accepted those losses. My ex-wife's friends still paint me as the villain on social media. I've been called controlling, vindictive, petty. Someone posted that I'd chosen furniture over my marriage. In a way, they're right. I did choose my grandfather's furniture over a relationship with someone who couldn't respect boundaries. I'd make the same choice again. I've had time to reflect on why I didn't add my wife's name to the deed. I told myself it was about honoring my grandfather's gift, but truthfully, some part of me always held back. Maybe I sensed that she didn't value the house the way I did. Maybe I knew, on some level, that our priorities were fundamentally different. She saw old furniture. I saw my grandfather's hands building that coffee table in his workshop, teaching me to sand with the grain, showing me how to apply wood stain properly. A few people have asked if I regret how I handled it, whether I should have tried counseling, given more warnings, been more understanding. I don't think so. I gave her chances. Every time I objected to a change, every time I asked about her mother's plans, every time I tried to discuss my feelings about my grandfather's belongings, she dismissed me every single time. The eviction wasn't my first move. It was my last one. Update 2. 6 months now. The house is almost completely restored. I found a craftsman who specializes in vintage furniture restoration. He's building new dining chairs that match the table's style. Should be ready next month. I've also started woodworking again, something I'd given up when I got married. My ex-wife had complained about the sawdust, the noise, the space it took up in the garage. Turns out, it was another thing I'd sacrificed without fully realizing it. My ex-wife reached out 2 weeks ago, not through lawyers this time, just a text from a new number. Asked if we could meet for coffee. Said she wanted closure. I agreed, curious what closure meant to her. We met at a neutral location, a cafe neither of us had been to before. She looked different, tired. She apologized again, said she'd been doing therapy, working through why she'd let her mother influence her so much. Said she understood now that she'd been wrong, that she'd violated my boundaries repeatedly, that she'd taken me for granted. I listened, didn't interrupt. Then she asked if there was any chance we could try again. Said she'd changed, that she'd set boundaries with her mother, that she'd never let anything like that happen again. I told her I appreciated the apology, that I was glad she was working on herself, but that we were done. She asked why. If I accepted her apology, we couldn't move forward. I explained that accepting an apology doesn't mean accepting the person back into your life. That forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. She cried. Said she'd thrown away 6 years of marriage over a mistake. I corrected her. She'd thrown away 6 years of marriage through months of choices. Each time she'd dismissed my concerns. Each time she'd prioritized her mother's opinions over mine. Each time she'd changed something without asking. It wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern of disrespect that had finally reached its breaking point. She asked what she was supposed to do now. I told her that wasn't my problem to solve, that she'd figure it out, just like I had. We finished our coffee in silence. When we left, she asked if we could stay in touch. I said no. Clean break was better for both of us. I haven't heard from her since. My mother-in-law apparently tells anyone who'll listen that I stole her daughter's house, that I'd promised to add my wife's name to the deed but never did. That's a lie. We discussed it casually a few times, but I'd never promised anything. My grandfather had given the house to me, specifically. I'd felt uncomfortable changing that without more thought. In the end, my hesitation saved me. People ask if I'm dating. Not yet. Maybe eventually. For now, I'm content with the quiet. With coming home to my grandfather's house, properly restored. With working in the garage on weekends, building small furniture pieces, learning techniques my grandfather never got to teach me. With sitting at his coffee table in the evening, reading, knowing it's exactly where it belongs. Update 3. A year has passed. The house is fully restored now. The new dining chairs arrived, and they're perfect. Even found one of the missing paintings at an estate sale, pure luck. The other is still gone, but I've accepted that. Life has settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, hobbies, time with friends who supported me through everything. I've started dating someone new, taking it slow. She came over for dinner last month. Commented on how beautiful the house was, asked about the furniture. I told her about my grandfather, about the restoration process. She listened carefully, said she could feel the love in every room. That meant something. My ex-wife got engaged last week. Saw it on social media before I'd blocked those mutual friends. Quick turnaround, but that's her choice. I feel nothing about it. No jealousy, no satisfaction, just indifference. That's how I know I've moved on. Someone asked me recently if I thought I'd overreacted. If the nuclear option had really been necessary. I've thought about this a lot. Could I have handled it differently? Probably. Could I have been more patient, more compromising? Maybe. But would that have addressed the fundamental problem? No. The fundamental problem was that my wife didn't see me as an equal partner. She saw me as an obstacle to what she wanted. When I objected, I needed to be managed or overruled, not heard and respected. That's not a marriage. That's not even a partnership. That's one person making decisions and expecting the other to fall in line. The house was just where that dynamic became impossible to ignore. If I'd backed down, what would have been next? How much of myself would I have had to sacrifice to keep the peace? My grandfather's legacy was the line I wouldn't cross. Turns out, that was exactly the right line to draw. I keep his photo on the mantle now. Him in his workshop, covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. I look at it sometimes and think about the lessons he taught me. Woodworking, yes, but also integrity. Standing up for what matters. Building things that last. He built this house to last. Built furniture to last. Tried to build me to last too. I'm still here. The house is still here. His furniture is still here, right where it belongs. My ex-wife is someone else's problem now. And I'm finally, fully at peace. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too.